At my retirement ceremony, after 32 years of serving the national health system, my brother stood on stage and said, "You were never meant to lead." And everyone laughed. Everyone but me. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I just turned, picked up my bag, and left. 3 weeks later, his medical license was under review, and they all wondered how it happened. The ballroom at the new Boston Civic Center smelled like eucalyptus and champagne. Over 200 people, soft jazz in the background, a giant screen looping photos of me in scrubs, hard hats, board meetings, disaster zones. 32 years, 4 presidents, 3 hospital systems, 2 national awards, and not a single person in that room knew I once took a second job at night to pay my mother's medical bills when Miles was in college. My name is Elara Tamsin. I was the one who never missed a shift, never had a scandal, never demanded praise. I just showed up, solved the problem, wrote the grant, paid the bill, and for 3 decades my family treated me like a back-end server, always on, never seen. They all came tonight. My mother in pearls that I bought. My sister-in-law in a dress she once said was too expensive, until I wired her the money. And my brother Miles, the golden child, the genius surgeon, the man who just got nominated to the board of Hollingworth Private Medical Group. I wasn't bitter. I was still like a glacier, cold, heavy, full of memory. I knew he would speak, he always does. He took the mic after the final toast, smiled that politician's smile, looked around the room like he owned it, then turned to me and said, "Elara was never the loudest, never the boldest, but she kept the lights on. She held the seat. Until someone like me came along. Laughter, applause. Someone said, 'That's family.' I didn't say a word. I reached down, picked up my clutch, walked out the side door, and let the champagne glass clink behind me, because that moment wasn't the end. It was the last domino, and I had been lining them up for years. The air outside was cold, not winter cold, clinical cold. The kind you feel in hospital stairwells at 3 a.m., where no one talks and the silence is sharper than any scalpel. I walked 3 blocks to the parking structure. Didn't rush, didn't cry, I just replayed his voice in my head. She held the seat until someone like me came along. They all laughed, they thought it was clever, but Miles forgot something. The seat he stood on, it was mine. I sat in the car for a long time, no music, just the low hum of the dashboard. Then I reached into the glove box and pulled out a USB drive. Small, black, unlabeled, the kind that looks like it holds a PowerPoint. But this one held 14 years of silent contribution. Receipts, transfers, grants I wrote in his name. The private donor contract I brokered that kept his failing clinic open during the 2031 audit, and a flagged email chain buried in the hospital archive where Miles approved a cosmetic procedure under a pediatric trauma code to get insurance to cover it. I didn't send anything. Not yet. First, I drove home, took off the navy suit I bought for the ceremony, hung it carefully in the dry cleaner plastic, then sat at my desk and opened the secure file I'd labeled, "Contingency if they ever forget who I am." Inside were PDFs, spreadsheets, scan checks, everything. I hadn't planned to use it, but I hadn't planned to be erased in front of 200 people either. They thought I'd stay quiet, that I'd keep the family image tidy, that I'd absorb the hit like always, then still pay the mortgage on our mother's house. But here's what they didn't know. I'd already pulled my name off the deed. 3 months ago. I let them live in the fantasy that I still owned it, just like they let me believe I still belonged. The difference, I had documentation, and I was tired of playing nice for people who only clap when you're useful. The next morning, I woke up at 6:17. No alarm, no calls, just instinct, old habit really. I'd spent years waking up early to solve other people's emergencies before they became mine. But today it was my turn. I brewed coffee, no cream, no sugar, just bitter and black. Then I logged into my secure portal and downloaded one file, Patient Fraud Form 22B, Anonymous Whistleblower. The form didn't ask for a name. It only needed evidence, and I had plenty. I didn't embellish. I didn't write a narrative, just uploaded the receipts. 4 cosmetic surgeries billed under emergency pediatric trauma. Signed referrals from Miles using my old credentials without my consent. A shell payment from the Hollingworth Foundation routed through our mother's account to avoid tax reporting. It took 11 minutes. I hit submit, closed the tab, finished my coffee. By 11:03 a.m., I had my first voicemail. It was from Miles. "Hey, Elle heard you left in a bit of a rush last night. Listen, about what I said, it was just a joke. Everyone laughed. You know how these events get, right? No apology, just an attempt to rewrite the script before the review board found the footnotes." I didn't respond. Instead, I printed the final set of documents, my official letter declining further financial obligation to the family trust. Legal withdrawal from co-signing Miles' private clinic expansion loan. Termination of the auto transfer to Mom's mortgage. I placed them in separate envelopes. No notes, no explanations, just signatures, just reality. By 4 p.m., my sister-in-law called. Her voice was high-pitched, the kind she used when she was trying to sound warm, but really she was cornered. "Hey, we're just checking in. Are you okay? You seemed tense last night. Miles is worried. We all are." I almost laughed. I wasn't tense. I was ready. Because here's what none of them understood. They didn't just humiliate me. They freed me. That night I walked into the guest room, the one I never used, opened the closet, pulled out 3 sealed banker boxes labeled in red ink, for when it breaks. Inside were statements, copies, backups of backups. I wasn't just cutting them off. I was dismantling the system they built on my silence. And they were about to feel what it's like when the scaffolding disappears. It took exactly 4 days. Not 3. Not 5. 4. That's how long it took before the first crack showed in their perfect little performance. It started with a leaked memo. Someone from the Hollingworth board forwarded a redacted notice to my old work email, still active thanks to a lazy IT department. Subject line: urgent compliance inquiry into Dr. Miles Tamsin's billing practices. Board vote postponed indefinitely. No explanation, no signature, just silence. The kind that screams louder than outrage ever could. That evening, Miles called again, then texted, then called from my mother's phone. I didn't pick up, but I watched, because when people lose control of the narrative, they panic, and panic leaves footprints. By the end of the week, his clinic's Yelp page went private. The website listed the phone line as temporarily unavailable. And my mother, my always neutral, always nurturing mother, left me a message. "I hope you understand what you've done. You didn't just embarrass him. You've damaged this family." Family. That word again. They only invoke it when they need you obedient, not when they are belittling you at retirement ceremonies. Not when they're draining your bank account to fund vacations and investments and cosmetic veneers. Only when you finally say no. The next day I got a knock at my apartment door. Not a call, not a text. A knock. I checked the hallway camera. It was Miles, no flowers, no apology. Just his face, drawn, pale, lips pressed so tight they disappeared. I didn't open the door, but I listened. He stood there for 12 minutes. Then said to the empty hallway, "I need you to fix this. You're the only one who can." And that's when I knew he still didn't get it. He thought I had started the fire. He didn't realize I just stopped holding the hose. The next morning, a certified letter arrived from the family's estate attorney. Inside, a request to discuss misunderstandings regarding the family trust, a note offering a reconciliation session at my earliest convenience, and a subtle warning: if I removed myself officially, my future inheritance rights could be voided. Cute. They still thought this was about money. They hadn't yet realized I already paid the cost. In time, in silence, in years of self-erasure. Now I was simply collecting the receipt. The envelope was unmarked. No logo, no return address. Just my name handwritten, in a script I hadn't seen in years. Inside, one page, typed, single-spaced, titled, Internal Communication Board Member Discretion Requested. The content made my stomach still. It wasn't from Miles, it wasn't from the lawyer, it was from Dr. Reese Galloway, one of the hospital board members. An old mentor of mine, back when I was still solving infrastructure crises in rural counties no one remembered. His note was short. Elara, I don't know what they expected, but whatever comes next, be careful. I've seen them prepare PR spin cycles before, and if they can't win, they will reframe. Stay ahead, don't blink. No emotion, no pity, just a warning and the signature still on your side. RG, I folded the letter slowly, set it down, then exhaled because I already knew what came next. It was textbook. Phase 1, gaslight the whistleblower. She's emotional. She misunderstood the documents. She's retaliating after being excluded. Phase 2, revise the history. She wasn't actually central to anything. She was always difficult. She exaggerated her role. Phase 3, silence or shame. But here's the problem. I didn't have to defend the truth. I documented it. That night, I pulled up an old shared drive from a consulting project I did for the state hospital board. It was buried in archived folders, under layers of budget analysis. But it was there, a recording from a Zoom call dated 2 years ago. Miles was on that call, so was I. We were discussing funding misallocations in rural prenatal programs, and Miles, cocky, half-listening, sipping from a whiskey glass, had made a mistake. He said, "Let's just reroute it through the regional mental health budget. No one tracks that anyway." I had flagged it internally at the time, but they buried it. Now I had the recording, and suddenly the leverage they thought they had was gone. I stared at the screen, finger hovering over the send button. I could forward it to the board, to the press, to the Medical Ethics Review Council, but I didn't. Not yet, because Reese was right. This wasn't about vengeance. It was about control. And if I released everything now, they'd twist it into a personal vendetta. Another hysterical woman too bitter to let go. No, I wasn't going to throw fire. I was going to turn off the oxygen. 2 days after Reese's letter, I logged into the one portal I had never touched. Not out of sentimentality, out of restraint. The Tamsin Family Trust. The fund I built over 16 years. The same fund they bragged about as generational stewardship, while I quietly poured my bonuses, equity shares, and overtime stipends into it. I had never touched a dime, but they had. Miles pulled $48,000 business advancement withdrawal 3 years ago. My sister-in-law funneled $9,800 labeled as childcare expansion. Even my mother pulled $200 monthly under maintenance disbursement. They treated it like a personal vault because I let them. But today I changed the locks. I initiated 3 actions. 1, froze all outgoing transactions. 2, requested full audit. 3, filed legal paperwork to dissolve my custodial role. No announcement, no family meeting, just 3 keystrokes, and a silence they wouldn't hear until it hit their bank apps. By 4:42 p.m. it had. First, a text from my sister-in-law. "Elara, the childcare invoice bounced. Did something happen?" Then Miles, "What did you do to the fund?" And finally, my mother, a voicemail. Her voice was flat, clipped, rehearsed. "You're jeopardizing the entire structure your father built. Do you understand that? This isn't just about Miles anymore." And she was right. This was never just about Miles. This was about a system where I was never the daughter, just the default donor, where I could be erased at dinner, then expected to pay for the dessert. And now the power was out, and they were fumbling in the dark. That night, my building's concierge called. "MS, "Tamsin, you have a visitor downstairs. He's not on the list but says it's urgent." I already knew who it was. I checked the camera. It wasn't Miles. It was my father's oldest friend, Douglas Graff, former accountant of the family trust. He hadn't spoken to me in 8 years. Now, suddenly, he had time. I told the concierge to send him up. Douglas entered quietly, held his hat in his hand like he was entering a funeral. "Elara, I've been asked to mediate." I raised an eyebrow. "A negotiation or a cleanup?" He hesitated. "Both." I nodded, walked to the kitchen, poured him a glass of water, and sat down across from him. No yelling, no tears, just strategy. Because here's the truth they never understood. When you've spent your whole life holding up a system, you know exactly how to take it apart, quietly, precisely, permanently. I waited 3 days, not because I needed time, because I wanted silence to settle, because nothing confuses manipulators more than no access and no reaction. Then I wrote it, not a manifesto, not a rant, just a letter, addressed not to my mother, not to Miles, not to any individual, but to the entire Tamsin family. To those who once called me sister, daughter, benefactor, and burden, I understand now. I was never part of the family. I was part of the function. I was the stable one, the solvent one, the she doesn't need much one. You didn't see me. You saw what I could provide. Time, money, silence. And when I stopped providing, you stopped pretending. So let me offer the gift you never gave me, clarity. I will no longer participate in your stories. Not the family newsletters, not the reunion headcounts, not the whispered damage control behind brunch napkins. I will not rescue you from the systems you built to trap me. I will not protect reputations that never protected me. I am not angry. I am not waiting for an apology. I am not hoping you understand. I am simply done. Consider this my resignation, not from love, but from performance. And before you call me selfish, know this: I was generous for decades, generous to a fault, and now I choose to be generous to someone else, myself. Asterisk, I printed it, sealed it in 10 envelopes, mailed it to each of them, my mother, Miles, his wife, the estate attorney, the cousins, the neutral uncles, the ones who always stayed silent. Then I blocked them, one by one, not in anger, but like removing outdated software that no longer served the system I was building. A week later, I left the city. Just a carry-on, a train ticket to the northern coast, a cottage I'd bought under a trust name 5 years ago, waiting for a day I didn't yet believe would come. And now here I was, free. Sometimes I walk the beach at dusk. No phone, no noise, just the sound of tide pulling back what doesn't belong. And one evening, I sat on the porch and wrote the first page of my journal. Asterisk, I didn't walk away to prove a point. I walked away because I finally understood that love is not duty, and peace is not guilt, and silence is not consent. They didn't lose me. They lost access. Asterisk, Elara's story is not a revenge. It's a release. And for audiences who have ever felt indispensable but invisible, this is the ending they never got until now.